Usual sound check. 1 second. Usual sound check. 1 second. Okay. Okay, you're going to get straight into it. Don't want to waste too much time. Want to knock this out in a good amount of time. So, welcome to edition 5 of the newsletter I've been writing. So, this week's topic has been 30 programming truths I know at 30 that I wish I knew at 20. We're never going to stop with a clickbait, I'm afraid. So we're just going to get straight into it, to be honest. Get straight into it. Okay, about here. Oh, check the sound still on. Yep, sound's still there. Cool. Okay, start off. There. Let's wake up. Okay, good to go. So. I'm 33 years old at the time of recording this. I'm 33 years old at the time of recording this. And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in a variety of roles in various roles with a variety of brands and businesses. And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in various roles. And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in various roles with a variety of brands and businesses. Here's 30 programming truths I know at 30 that I wish I knew at 20. Here's 30 programming truths I know at 30 that I wish I knew at 20. Number 1. Watch out for long chain dependencies. That meme about node modules being the heaviest object in the universe is true. That meme about node modules being the heaviest object in the universe is true for one main reason. Long dependency chains. Dependencies are like a tarot card. Dependencies are like a tarot cards. You knock one out, they all come tumbling down. Be wary when packages have deeply nested dependencies. And don't fall into the same track of creating packages or modules that keep stacking on top of each other. Number two, you should learn multiple languages. I started off with PHP, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. As plain, boring, and bog standard as you can get. I didn't really jump into using more languages until I was about 3-4 years into. I didn't really jump into using more languages until I was about 3-4 years into. I didn't really jump into using more languages until about 3-4 years into working as a developer. By that point, I was so comfortable with what I knew that I struggled to try anything else. It just felt like starting from scratch. This was a mistake because those languages trapped me in an area of development. This was a mistake because those languages trapped me in an area of development where I had no awareness of what other languages could provide and possible other job opportunities. This was a mistake because those languages tapped. Yeah. This was a mistake because those languages trapped me in an area of development where no awareness of what could be missing from languages. This was a mistake because those languages trapped me in an area of development where I had no awareness of what other languages could provide and potential other job opportunities. Oh, please don't tell me the camera stopped. Camera stopped. Oh. Try and get it back. Might have to switch to the webcam. I don't think the camera's coming back. Hold on. I think the easiest thing might be to just do this again from the beginning without the cam link. Great, that wasted a bit of time. Got to get through these a bit quicker. Okay. All right, I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm 33. I'm 33 years. I'm 33 years old at the time of this recording. I'm 33 years at the time of. I'm 33 years old at the time of recording this. And I've worked as a developer for. And I've worked as a developer. Let me turn the camera off. Hold on. Not that one now. Useless. Oh, I forgot something about that. And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in various roles with various. And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in And I've worked as a developer for over 12 years in various roles with a variety of brands and businesses. Here's 30 programming truths I know at 30 that I wish I knew at 20. Number 1. Watch out for long chain dependencies. That meme about node modules being the heaviest object in the universe is true for one main reason. Long dependency chains. Long dependency chains. Dependencies are like a tower of cards. Dependencies are like a tower of cards. You knock one out, they all come tumbling down. Be wary when packages have deeply nested dependencies. And don't fall into the same trap of creating packages or modules that stack up on top of each other. And don't fall into the trap of creating packages or modules that keep stacking up and up and up. Number 2, you should learn multiple languages. Number 2, you should learn multiple languages. I started off with PHP, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. The plain, bog standard, old reliable web development stack. As plain and bog standard as you can get. I didn't really jump into using more languages until about 3 or 4 years in working. I didn't really jump into using more languages until about 3-4 years into working as a developer. By that point I was so comfortable. By that point I was so comfortable with what I knew. I struggled to try anything else. It felt like starting from scratch. This was a mistake because those languages trapped me in an area of development where I had no awareness of other languages and what they could provide, and even robbed me of a few job opportunities. Number 3, always check for truthy values. Always avoid double negatives and always avoid double negatives and almost always check for truthy values. Reading code where you're checking for truthy values is so much easier to read. If you have to use a negative naming on a variable name, like is not a pizza, then never pair it with a logical not. Then never pair it with a logical not. Then never pair it with a logical not comparison. Then never pair it with a logical not comparison. This creates a double negative which is hard to This creates a double negative which is just a pain to understand. This creates a double negative which is just a pain to read and really cognitively hard to understand. This creates a double negative which is just a pain to read and just. This creates a double negative which is just. This creates a double negative which is just a. This creates a double negative which is just a pain to read and creates cognitive load when it's not necessary. Number four, the language you start with doesn't matter. I already mentioned what I started with. I already mentioned what I started with. Some people would argue and say start with something else, but the truth is what you start with doesn't matter, it's just the fact that you get started that matters. Do a little bit of research of what you want to build or what area of development you want to work in and find the relevant Do a little bit of research into what you want to build or what area of development you want to work in, make an educated choice, and then go from there. You're not bound to any one language. You're not bound to any one language, and learning your first language makes learning the next one easier, and then so on. Number 5. Practice data manipulation, especially arrays. The majority of programming software software revolves around moving data from one place to another. Manipulating, shaping, and trimming along the way. So get really good at shaping and understanding data structures. In particular, get really good with arrays. They're in every language and will be the most common type you work with. Most of the time we'll be sorting, filtering, and trimming data that's stored in an array. Number 6, master your tools. Speed and efficiency trump the latest and greatest. There's no point using the latest and greatest framework if it takes 2 to 3 times longer for you to do in that. There's no point using the latest and greatest language and framework if it takes you 2 to 3 times more. There's no point using the latest and greatest. There's no point using the latest language or framework if it takes you 2 to 3 times longer to get the same task done as if you could do it in the same stack that you're comfortable with. Software requirements change. In this high-speed world, being able to deliver quality quickly In this high-speed world, being able to deliver quality quickly matters. Number seven, get really comfortable with typing. This one might change in the future. With AI tools and voice control getting a lot better for software. But for now, we're all mostly typing still. If you're getting long uninterrupted blocks of time for coding, then you'll simply get more done by being able to type quickly, efficiently, and accurately. It's what we spend the majority of our time doing, so it makes sense to actually give it some practice. Find a keyboard that's comfy for you. Find a keyboard that's comfy for you and get really cozy with it. Look at things like Vim Motions for better code editing. Look at things like Vim Motions for better code navigation without having to reach for the mouse. And have fun with something like Monkey Type. Number 8, embrace your curiosity. Follow the spark of curiosity. Lots of people would tell you to go this way or that. Learn this thing or that thing. Take this career path or that. Instead, listen to your mind. What do you think about when all is quiet with nobody around? What blog or Twitter post caught your eye? Follow these trails of curious thought and then dive deeper. Genuine curiosity will lead you to places other people simply won't go because they don't get that same feeling or spark. That's where you can shine. In the place that you're intrinsically drawn to be. In the place that you're intrinsically drawn to. Number 9. Avoid the else-if pattern. Avoid else-if like the plague. It's verbose and creates a strict linear. It's verbose and creates a strict linear. It's verbose and creates a strict linear logic. It's verbose and creates a strict linear form of logic that could be better simplified with something like a switch statement. Sometimes they can be combined into groups and have standalone if statements. Sometimes they can be combined into groups and have. Sometimes they can be combined into groups and have standalone if statements. And then a final default return at the end of the function. It's just neater and easier to follow. Number 10. Number 10. Try both a scripting language and a compiled language. They both have different strengths and they both have different weaknesses. They both behave differently, and it's best to try one of each. They both behave differently, and it's a good idea to try at least one of each so you can get a feel for how different they can be. And where they're similar. The workflows tend to be different between the two. The workflows tend to be different between the two, so you might find one that suits your style more, or one. The workflows tend to be different. The workflows tend to be different between the two. The workflows tend to be different between the two, so you might find. The workflows tend to be different between the two, so you might find one suit. The workflows tend to be different between the two, so you might find one style suits you more and your values better than the other. Number 11, and I've stopped counting with the fingers now. Try both Number 11, and I've stopped trying to count with the fingers now. Number 11, and I'm gonna stop. Number 11, and I'm gonna stop counting with the fingers now. Try both object-oriented programming and functional programming. Two paradigms, very different approach in how two paradigms, very different approach to how code is written and behaves. Like the last point we mentioned, they both have strengths and weaknesses. People can get very zealous about these two things, so it's best to try both. People get very zealous about these two things, so it's best to try both and understand how they both work. I was brought up with object-oriented programming, but I found that I much preferred the data flow and with functional and easy test as well. I was brought up with object-oriented programming, but I found the I was brought up with object-oriented programming, but I much preferred but found that I much preferred the data flow with functional and found it easier to test as well. Try both and broaden your horizons. Number 12. Number 12. Don't abstract too early. Abstracting something too early in development can lead you down a path that would be quite difficult. Abstracting something too early in development could lead you down a path where it's difficult to come back from again. When you find yourself in a situation where you could abstract something, ask yourself these 3 questions. Do I know the majority of the cases where this abstraction will be used? Does the abstraction make sense not just to me, but to anyone else? Is the abstraction valuable, or is it simply hiding messy code? If you're not sure on the answer to these questions, then you might want to reconsider before moving ahead. Number 13. Forget dry and try damp. Most developers swear by this one, but there's one problem with it. We repeat ourselves all the time. It's a very concrete statement. Don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. That assumes forever, right? The problem is it needs a bit more nuance than that. There are times where repeating yourself is fine. If we abstracted or extracted every piece of code that we use twice, we'd probably never stop. A good rule of thumb I found is this. Have I coded this same logic at least 3 times? Can it be tested easily? Are there any special cases where I'm using this? It forces you to think about the abstraction and whether it's valuable or not. Bad abstractions can create unwanted coupling and bad abstractions can create unwanted coupling and bad abstractions can create unwanted coupling and bad abstractions can create unwanted coupling. Bad abstractions can create unwanted coupling and complexity. Number 14. Number 14. Work on communication skills early. This is a big one that can limit your ability to progress in your career. The further up the career ladder you go, the more important this skill becomes. The further up the career ladder you go, the more important this skill becomes. Because your responsibilities and duties expand. Because your duties and responsibilities expand and your Because your duties and responsibilities expand. Your work becomes more about leadership. Your work becomes more about leadership, mentoring, guiding practices, and principles. And your work becomes more about leadership, mentoring, guiding practices. And your work becomes more about leadership, mentoring, and guiding practices. And your work becomes more about leadership. And your work becomes more about leadership, mentoring, and guiding And your work becomes more about leadership, mentoring, guiding practices and principles in your engineering team and environment. You'll need to communicate with people from all parts of the business and adjust accordingly. If you can't communicate simply and effectively, then you'll struggle to build confidence for yourself and the team.
Quack number 15. Quack number 15. Use the rubber duck.
This vital piece of equipment could make or break. This vital piece of equipment could make or break a difficult problem. This vital piece of equipment could make or break a difficult problem you face. Okay, it's not vital to have an actual duck. You can get the same effect by yourself or with another person. But make sure to use this technique. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented as an effective way to be able to break down problems when you're struggling. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented as an effective tool. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented to be an effective tool. Effective way of being able to break down problems when you're struggling. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented. Rubber duck debugging has been widely documented as an effective way to break down problems when you're struggling. The basic principle is to The basic principle is to explain the problem, preferably out loud, to the duck. Stepping through the problem with the duck makes you analyze the problem from a different perspective. And communicating clearly and precisely is an effective. And communicating clearly and precisely is a skill in itself. This will test whether you fully understand the problem or not. Go grab one of these bad boys. So you can pass. I'll put a link in the description for this one. Number 16. If the duck fails, then take a walk. Number 16. If the duck fails, then take a walk. Sometimes not even the almighty Gandalf can save us. If that's the case, then getting up and going for a walk could be the answer. Everyone's heard of Steve Jobs' famous walking meetings. There's plenty of benefits. There's plenty of science that explains the benefits of walking, and I try and get in a daily walk of at least 45 minutes each day. I have a whole video where I talk about daily walks. You can go check it out. Whenever I've been stuck on a problem and debugging with the duck out loud or with somebody else just doesn't cut it, find that getting up and walking away from the desk for 5-10 minutes. I find that getting up and walking away from the desk for 5 to 10 minutes will yield what I need. I find that getting up and walking away from the desk for 5 to 10 minutes will get the answer that I need. I find that getting up and walking away from the desk for 5 to 10 minutes will get what I need. It's the combination of movement and getting our eyes away from the screen that allows our It's a combination of movement and getting our eyes away from the screen that lets our brain process in a different way. Get up from the desk more. Number 17. Be a lifelong learner. I believe you can never really truly master anything. Nobody ever goes to the grave completing everything in a given topic. There is always more to learn. In that case, embrace being a lifelong learner. The goal is not to complete your training and then sail away happily ever after. The goal and the game is to constantly improve. The goal and the game is to constantly improve, constantly learn and grow. It will be a lot easier if you embrace this. It will be a lot easier if you embrace this and it will be a lot easier if you embrace this and enjoy the process. Don't see it as extra work. Life is work. The most enjoyable parts of your life, some of the most enjoyable parts of your life will happen when you're in a deep state of some of the most enjoyable parts of life come from being engrossed in a deep state of work and flow. Enjoy the learning. If you struggle to enjoy what you're learning, then try something else. Your intrinsic curiosity will lead you to your intrinsic curiosity will guide you to things. Your intrinsic curiosity will guide you to things that feel like work for others but play for you. Your intrinsic curiosity will guide you to things that feel like play but work for others. Number 18. Write more. It is a core skill for life. There is not a single profession or vocation in this world that there is not a single profession or vocation in this world. There is not a single profession in this world that is not improved by being able to write better. And it isn't being able to just write better for the sake of it. It's what comes from the writing itself. Writing is clarifying understanding. It's an incredible tool for learning. One of the most powerful tools you have for learning, discovery. One of the most powerful tools you have for learning, discovery, collaboration, and communication. One of the most powerful tools you have for learning, discovery, collaboration, and communication. And specifically for programming, it helps with writing documentation, pull request reviews, and readability of code. Speaking of which, number 19, get good at naming. The two hardest things in programming are cache invalidation. The two hardest things in programming are cache invalidation and naming things. Make a real effort to work on the second one. Naming things well is the difference between code that people happily work with, maintain, and grow. Naming things is the difference between code people happily work with, maintain, and grow. And code that people can't update, and code that people can't follow, update, or understand. Keep naming simple and readable. For example, use adjectives. Use adjectives to explain. For example, For example, use adjectives to describe a variable's intent so you don't have to look at what it contains, it just describes. For example, use adjectives in variable names. For example, use adjectives in variables' names to describe its intent so people don't have to look at what's in it, they just know what it's been used for. For example, use adjectives to describe variables' intent so that people don't have to look at what's in it, they know what it's being used for. Number 20, kiss. Number 20, kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. A widely used phrase in programming. Simple is hard to achieve, so it's important to take our time, break things down, and find a way to make complex things simple. Simple does not mean easy. Simple is an art and is difficult to achieve. Avoid getting dragged into needless complexity. It is the death of software. The more complexity you introduce, the more chances you create for your The more complexity you introduce, the more chances you create for your code to fail. Strive for simple. Number 21. Use comments in your code as a last resort. Apart from packages, libraries, and modules, I really do feel like commenting your code is unnecessary. Don't feel the need to comment every line of code. Don't feel the need to comment every line of code. And documentation isn't the same as commenting code. Good engineers can understand what code does by following its path, looking at the variable names, if it's named well. And essentially, the code becomes the documentation. If something is particularly complicated and it's not obvious how to make it simpler, if something's particularly complicated and it's not simple, If something is particularly complicated and it's not obvious how to create If something is particularly complicated and it's not obvious how to make it simpler, or if its usage is confusing, then do reach for the comments, but use them sparingly. Number 22. Two little ducks. 22. Study with materials, learn with projects. We gather and collate knowledge by reading, listening, and watching. We learn through implementing creation and action. Don't get stuck in tutorial hell, you'll learn nothing. Once you've studied some information, test yourself on it. Once you study some information, test yourself on it. Use it. Once you study some information, test yourself on it. Use it. Make something. Programming is a skill, a creative outlet. Programming is a skill, a craft, a creative outlet. And you simply don't learn through passive activities. There's a great video by Python programmer. There's a great video by Python programmer. There's a great video by Python programmer which explains that creating is the highest order of learning. Number 23. Start with small projects that pique your curiosity, then work up. It's easy to see what people make online and get a bit jealous. Or it might be desire, excitement, whatever you might feel when you see something creating something that looks great. Or it might be desire, excitement, whatever you feel when you see someone who's making when you see someone creating something that looks great. Or it might be desire, excitement, whatever you feel when you see something that someone is creating that looks great. But when we're starting out, it's better to start off with small problems and projects and work our way up from there. Seeing something through to completion is a skill in itself. If you tackle something too big, too early, you'll struggle to finish it. Seeing something through to completion is a skill in itself, and if you tackle on Seeing something through to completion is a skill in itself. If you tackle something too big, too early, you'll struggle to see it through to the finish. If you're curious about building something, then try and pick off a feature or piece of functionality that you could tackle on its own. Oops. Hey, I can. I don't want to butcher your name in chat, by the way, but just saying hi. Abimanu, did I say that right? Don't want to say it wrong. Don't want to butcher the name. What I'm working on these days, at the minute, I'm doing these live streams where I basically kind of talk through the newsletters that I publish. So we're on edition 5 at the minute. So the idea is I talk through these like newsletters and turn them into YouTube videos so people can watch them as well as read them. But when people do join the live stream, such as yourself, the idea is when I get to kind of reading out the stuff in the newsletter, if people want to stick around and get a little bit more insights on particular things that I mention in the newsletter, then they're free to ask questions and stuff like that, and I can respond to them. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm also working on learning Golang, but don't call it Golang, but working on learning Go programming language. I've been doing that live streaming as well from scratch. Never done Go before. It's a whole live stream playlist you can go and see with me learn it from scratch. I'll be continuing that next Wednesday scheduled for, and that'll be the first practical session I'll be going through. So yeah, those are the two things I'm kind of working on, and obviously working on YouTube as well. So all this and building my personal brand. So what are you working on at the minute? And I hope I pronounced your name right. You can build it end to end and learn its ins and outs in greater depth. Number 24, write your code in long format to start with. This might sound weird, but for some programming languages, okay, right. This might sound weird, but for some programming languages, it's a good idea to start off with writing things in longhand format. This might sound weird, but for some programming languages, I can't get this. This might sound weird, but for some programming languages, I think it's a good idea to write out the longhand. This might sound weird, but for some programming languages, it's a good idea to write out the longhand format. For example, in CSS, there are properties like margin, padding, border radius that all encapsulate. For example, in CSS, there's margin, padding, border radius, box shadow that encompass. No, that's not right. For example, in CSS, there's multiple properties like margin, For example, in CSS, there's multiple properties like margin padding. Oh, got it wrong again. For example, in CSS, there's multiple properties like margin, padding, border radius that encapsulate multiple properties into one. If you write it out the long-handed way with each if you write it out with each property defined individually, you understand all the components that go into that one encapsulation. Some of which you might not have known of or understand without doing so. Oh, good. I got the pronunciation right. That's good. Good to know. Learning bot development. Web automation, Puppeteer, cool tool called Gitmail. That's cool. So when you say bot development, you mean automation bots or robots, like physical robots. I'm guessing automation robots. So Gitmail, that's cool. So who's the kind of like who's the potential customers for something like Gitmail? Just out of curiosity. So, number 25, build a framework or package. If you find yourself using the same copy-paste code between projects, then go a step further and try and create a package or module. Yeah. If you find yourself using the same copy-paste code, if you find yourself using the same copy-paste code between projects, then go a step further and create a shared package or module. If you want to understand how React.js or Vue.js work at a fundamental level, if you want to understand how React.js or Vue.js really work, then try and implement some of the features in your own framework. There's a big difference between the code we produce for ourselves and teams than the code that we produce that's open source and accessible for other people to use. Code we produce for ourselves and our teams. There's a big difference between code we produce for ourselves and teams. And creating something that can be distributed, shared, and used for open source. And creating something that can be distributed and shared. And creating something that can be distributed and shared through open source. And used through open source. And creating something that can be distributed and shared and and used through open source. And creating something that can be distributed and shared and used between... How was that it? And creating something that can be distributed and shared... And creating something that can be distributed, shared, and used through open source. It will teach you invaluable lessons about coding. Automation robots and agents. Cool. Dev needed to pitch their ideas. Okay, so developers that build tools or SaaS products that want to pitch to... Oh, I see. Right. They want to find like other developers maybe to sell to, or like sell the projects to, or kind of get people on board for their projects, things like that. Sounds interesting. Number 26, build a CLI tool. This one can be a lot of fun. We spend a lot of time in our terminal tools and we use a lot of things through the terminal. Build something you can use that improves your workflow, or just something for fun. It's a very different experience than writing most software that you write day to day. It's a very different experience than writing most software you do day to day. And it can be a really exciting talking point that you can have with other developers as well. Number 27, get friendly with logging. Monitoring and observability of systems is vital for production software. Monitoring and observability for systems is vital for production software. Crap. Monitoring and observability for system. Monitoring and observability of systems is vital for production software. You need to be comfortable with implementing logging mechanisms. But also comfortable in reading logs, accessing logs in various ways, and debugging using logs. They're your window into what's happening in your applications, they're your window into what's happening in your applications and gives you visibility to potential problems ahead of time. They're your window into what's happening in your applications and provide you with visibility ahead of time. They're your window into what's happening in your applications and gives you visibility to problems ahead of time. They're your window into what's happening in your applications and gives you visibility of potential problems ahead of time. They're your window into They're your window into what's happening in your applications and gives you visibility of potential problems ahead of time. I have some challenges with spelling. Do I have dyslexia? No, I don't have dyslexia. If you're talking about the newsletter, if you read it, I did realize I was in a little bit of a rush when I was finishing that up, so I probably didn't spell check everything right. So I noticed in the paragraph actually I was just reading from the newsletter. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff at the end. So I put your instead of you, and then there's a no full stop at the end, stuff like that. So you need to go back and tidy up those sorts of things. It's just a mistake. I type up all my newsletter notes in Obsidian. So they're all in Markdown files, and Obsidian does have does work with your sort of systems like, spell checker, but it doesn't pick up on everything for some reason. And some things, it's just a little bit more forgiving in what you actually type. It doesn't go really, really, really strict on things. So I might actually have to run these through something like Hemingway or something like that to just check for things like that, because you read through, you type, you think, oh, it's fine and stuff, and then there's just mistakes here and there. But no, my brother has dyslexia though. So, number 28, handle your errors explicitly. Some languages do this better than others. But if you know a potential error could occur, then handle it explicitly. Some languages force this like Go. Some languages force this like Go, but languages like TypeScript, JavaScript will fail. Some languages force this like Go. Some languages force this like Go, but some languages like JavaScript will fail for many reasons, and there won't be any clues as to where it could fail. If you know something that might fail, then cater for that. Number 29, use the debugger. Everyone uses console log, print, or echo. Everyone uses console log, print, echo, whatever it may be, to debug our code. But using an actual debugger will give you insights. But using an actual debugger will give you insights into what's happening in your code, where and in what order things are happening. They're not hard to use once you understand what it is that they're doing and learn the basic controls. They're not hard once you understand what it is that they're doing and learn the basic controls. They improve your ability to debug massively. Need a drink. 1 sec. Time's it. Oh, getting to the end. Need that. Wait. So, number 30, two more to go now on the outro. Number 30, get comfortable not knowing. A lot of time during programming, you're going to feel lost, frustrated, scared, and even a little bit dumb. But that's part of the parcel for learning anything. You're not going to know how to do something until you've done it at least once. You won't know how to build a web-based calendar component. You won't know how to build a search-based API. You won't know a lot of things. There's no manual. There's great resources online, but there isn't a resource for everything. There's no manual, and there's great resources online, but not for everything. There's great resources online, but not for everything. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable in order to grow. The majority of programming and software and programming is problem solving. The majority of software and programming is problem solving. You'll need to accept not knowing and instead break problems down until you can solve it. And then, bonus tip number 31. Keep working on the fundamentals. Avoid shiny framework syndrome. AI is everywhere. AI is everywhere right now. People think traditional coding will die off. It might, but that time is not now. Learning the fundamentals will always serve you well in the long run. If you understand code at a deep level and keep practicing the fundamentals of software engineering, you'll be able to adapt to any language, any framework, any tool, and keep moving forward. If you understand code at a deep level and the fundamentals of software engineering, you'll be able to adapt to any language, any framework, any tool, and be able to keep moving forward. There's a great quote from Kobe Bryant that says, "I never get bored with the basics." The best in the world at anything all master the basics, the fundamentals. It's not fancy tricks or complex skills that It's not fancy tricks and complex skills they know that makes them the best. It's not fancy tricks and complex skills they know that makes them. It's not fancy tricks and complex skills they know that makes them the best. It's mastering the fundamentals. That means they can adapt to any situation and consistently stay on top. Don't follow the next shiny framework that comes along just because. Do it for fun if you wish, but don't drop everything else in place of it. Keep working on the fundamentals. And then the outro. If you like this video, then check out this next video. If you like this, then check out this next video where I highlight, where I share with you insights on what great developers do versus the average. If you like this, then check out this next video where I share insights on what great developers do versus the average developer. If you like this, then check out this next video where I share insights on what great developers do versus the average developer. I got light enough to shine it like. Quack. See you next time. Quack. Click it, please. I'll do. Bingo. Right. Got that done. Yeah. Alright, I think I'm going to end there. Got that one. That took a while. You have to find some better way to make quicker videos. DuckDuckGo. Yeah. You've seen this? I'll put it in the link in the description in the next video. It's a rubber duck. That's like, you know, Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Really, really cool. In fact, I'll probably be making a video on rubber ducking, so stay tuned for that one. 1 second. Oops. Don't know that. Why does it keep doing that? Why does it keep putting that one on? Yeah, I have to get going now. I've man you. Did you send a message with that thingy request and stuff? I can see it, but like, if you can send us an invite with a message of sort of like, yeah, what it is you sort of like want to collaborate on and stuff, like, you know, I'll happily look at it. I will be honest, I can't sort of like, I'm trying to keep to sort of like a good sort of like schedule at the minute of just content creation and kind of focusing on things. If there's things that you obviously like, you know, spot and want to kind of like, you know, share, by all means, like, really appreciate it. And at some point in the future, I'll probably look at when I have like more of a community, see if there's things that people would find valuable, like if I shared my time with them. So something like putting kind of like open sessions to help people with like CV reviews, just, you know, have a general chat about like career things like that, stuff like that. If people want to, like, you know, collaborate on something or kind of put like a pitch forward and stuff, then I'd be totally open for that. At the minute, I just haven't got the time really. So happy to connect and stuff. I'm not on like my social media a lot, so I don't see it like every day. I schedule like all my content. So yeah, just make sure to send a message with it, and I'll get to it when I do my sort of like weekly check of the different platforms for engagement. But yeah, but thanks for coming along. Thanks for watching. It's a bit of a weird live stream because this is not like what we'd sort of like normally do. I do this as a live stream as kind of like a practice for just sort of being on camera, and so that it kind of say like for people who are starting YouTube in the future and kind of like worried about getting started and all that. This is me basically kind of showing like my work in a way. So if anybody comes back and thinks about like, oh, I can't make YouTube videos, you know, this and that reason, stuff like that, I say, look, go have a look at this playlist where I live stream, basically creating all the YouTube videos that I do weekly. So I record them so people see all the mistakes, all the cutouts, all the ums, are, buts, and yeah, just all the bad stuff that I have to cut out when creating one video. And hopefully it gives people a little bit more hope and belief that they can do it as well. Still at the very beginning, so There's that. So that's it. Thanks for joining. Hopefully see you around. I'll look out for your request. Really appreciate you spending time here. So have a good night.